I will answer questions in a separate video because there were quite a few this week. Step 5 in our Big Six process is synthesis, the step where you take the research you did and answer two main questions. How should I organize my results, and how should I present what I've found? This will change with every new assignment you have, so it is important to go back to step 1, task definition, and make sure you are following the assignment in your final project. During this step, you will use all the research you found before and put it together into your speech, visual, paper, etc. It depends on your assignment. So, if I go back to my assignment, I need to create a visual with some text to describe the history of Veterans Day, and I can use Google Draw or draw it by hand. In this case, I am going to create a timeline with information from my research. My first step will be to look at the information I collected in step 4. Last week, I was using a handout with all of the steps, and that is what I used to take notes. What I realized was that I wanted a way to rearrange my information so I could more easily create a visual representation. I used a Google slide presentation for that because I can rearrange it. So going forward, you'll see slides for my notes. I formatted them to have the same information. My source cards are colored. I have a colored background on those, so you can tell that that is a different type of card. And then I just used a white background for all of my notes. And then I put on those cards, I put the type of card it is. So if it's a quotation, a summary, or a paraphrase. I put the source it's from, so I only have 2 sources, so source 1 or source 2. And then I have a little tagline in the corner so I kind of can see what the content of the card is. If you use paper note cards, that's how people format those as well. If they're using a print source, they'd also put the page number on it. And then in the middle, you have your information. So I only put one piece of information on each slide, or note card basically, because then I can rearrange those so that they are in the order that I need them for my actual presentation or my visual. So for instance, when I'm taking notes, I'm just writing down information for my article. It's in no particular order. That's totally fine. Then, since it's individual slides, I can rearrange those in grid view and put things into the order I need it for my display. That's also a nice thing to do because sometimes when you sort through all your cards or you sort through all your slides, you realize you don't have enough information, and then you can always go back to step 4 and do more research. Okay, so then for my synthesis, the first thing I did was go open up Google Draw, and I used the line tool to start a timeline format, and then I put the information in while indicating the sources I used. So a timeline in and of itself is a visual because of the topic I have, kind of the history of Veterans Day, or like I picked significant events along the way until we got to the current celebration of it, and I just put those in a timeline. So like I said, that's visual automatically. Then I wanted to add a little more so that it wasn't just a black and white timeline. So the timeline itself, like I said, is visual, but adding more images might also make it engaging. So I added a picture of poppies because they are a symbol for veterans all the way to World War I. There was a poem called In Flanders Field. It talked about the poppy fields, and the poppies became more and more a symbol of soldiers, and they were sold to raise money for veterans and their families, so that's why it's such a symbol. I also added the American flag at the information about the holiday becoming federal, and then I added symbols for each branch of the military because Veterans Day honors all branches of the military. Alright, and then also you'll notice my information will say something like November 11th, 1918, World War I, Armistice, and then in brackets or in parentheses it says Veterans Day. That's because that is from the article called Veterans Day. And then the other one you'll see is had an author listed, so I have the author's last name. And that's all you have to do for a citation on something or in a paragraph or on a visual, is just the first piece of information, because that lets people find your full information on your works cited page. So then you can do that works cited page separately for your visual. Step 6 is the final step of the Big Six research process. In this step, you take a few minutes to look at how everything went and consider what you might have done differently, as well as what you did well. The questions to consider are, how did my project turn out, and how did the process go? At this point, you can just think about the process, and if there's a rubric, You can use it to check how well you think you did. Sometimes a teacher might also give you a checklist, and that would be another way to reflect on the process. So it might be that you think, you know what, my ultimate project turned out really well. During the process, I could have been a little more focused. Maybe it took me too long to figure out what I was doing. The reason to do that is, as you are working on your presentation, if you take a minute at the end to think about what went well, what could I do better, the next time you have a project like this, you have a better idea of what you need to do, and so you can get it done a little quicker and a little better because you have a little more focus. So for instance, in my case, I should have realized earlier to switch the notes to Google Slides. They were like note cards and can be easily moved around. I did realize it before I had any students try to take notes and before I did a how-to video on how to do these steps. So that was a good thing, but I could have maybe saved myself some time if I had figured that out earlier. I also probably need to work on my final image a little bit more before I add it into when we share everybody's visuals. And I want to make sure my spacing looks correct. So there are a few things that I should do differently or I can do differently, and that's all part of this process. So thank you very much for your attention, and you can go ahead and do the activity.